أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I thought I'd choose those who were following the lessons before. We gave a couple of lessons about the universe, the creation of the universe. We gave a lesson about the sun, so it's moon's turn right now. There's a famous story that the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca performed a miracle when he split the moon. So did this really happen? How can we see the scientific proofs or any historic records about this miracle? We'll start with what the Quran says about that. The Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The hour has come near and the moon has split in two. So what's the story behind this verse? It was a full night, a full moon night in the month of Dhul Hijjah. As you remember, Prophet ﷺ faced a lot of trouble in Mecca to convince the people that God exists and He is the Creator. And He was showing them miracles, but every time He would show them a miracle, they would say, He is a magician, He's a sorcerer, He's just fooling our eyes and fooling our ears. So they decided, they saw how followers of the Prophet, are increasing in numbers and they're following him. So they decided maybe we should give him a very hard or impossible task, an impossible task of sorcery to perform. If he's a magician, he can fool us, but he cannot extend his magic to the skies, to outer space. So they decided to come to him and say, listen, we have a challenge for you. If you can do it, we'll believe in you. Actually, he asked them, if I do it, would you believe in me? They said yes. Now some narrations say that they actually were the ones who asked that he splits the moon. Another narration says that he was the one who proposed that he splits the moon. They didn't know what to propose, so he said, he looked at the moon, it was, I said, at night, and the moon, it was a full moon. He looked at the moon and he said, do you see the moon? Yes, it's a full moon. Who can't see it? Do you want me to split the moon? They said, it's impossible, but if you can do it, go ahead. So the narration says that Jibreel alayhi salam came down to the Prophet and he told him, whatever you ask, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer. And he said to him, just point with your hand towards the moon. And so the Prophet ﷺ pointed with his index finger to the moon. And just like that, the moon split into two halves. The narration says that one half could be seen above the mountain of Qayqa'an. That's a mountain in Mecca. Another half could be seen above the mountain of Qubais. Jabal Qubais also is a famous mountain. Qayqa'an, I never heard of it, but Jabal Qubais, it's a famous one. So anyway, the point being is that there's two mountains. You could see above that mountain one part of the moon, above that mountain another part of the moon. So just to make it clear to them, it's not like the two parts were close to each other. No, they were far from each other and they could see two separate parts of the moon. The narration actually says that it stayed like that for several hours. But do you expect them to believe? Some of them said, no, this is magic. Sihrun mustamir. Qaalو sihrun mustamir. His magic continues. His magic extended even to the skies. Even though they said the magic cannot normally extend to the skies. You can fool a few people sitting in front of you, but you cannot do magic in the skies. But others said, okay, if it's magic and he fooled our eyes, he couldn't have done that to people outside Mecca. So we have some travelers coming from Syria, coming from Sham, from Yemen. Let's wait for them to come and see if they saw something like that happen or not. If they didn't see it, then yes, it was magic. It just fooled us. Now the story is well known. It's a very well known story. Eventually the travelers came back and they asked them, did you see anything unusual on your trip? They said, yes, on so and so night, as we were walking, we saw the moon split into two halves. So some people, of course, are going to still deny, but some people were convinced and they followed the Prophet. As I said, this verse is not limited to one book of history or one book of commentary on the Quran. You would find it in both Sunni and Shia books. So it's a well-known fact among Muslims. You would rarely find a Muslim who would say, no, it did not happen. Especially, as I said, it's mentioned in the Quran. Even though, one could argue because the verse starts, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The hour is near, so one could argue, no, it's actually talking about the end of times that went before Judgment Day, the moon is going to split. But the numerous narrations that talk about this verse indicate that this verse actually is talking about something that happened in the past, in the time of the Prophet when he was still in Mecca. But unfortunately, as the Quran says, وَإِن يَرَوْا آيَةً يُعْرِضُوا وَيَقُولُوا سِحْرٌ مُسْتَمِرٌ. If they see a miracle, if they see a sign of our signs, they turn away and they say, no, it's just magic. His magic continues. It would be although a fair question to ask. If the moon split into two halves, if it actually happened, can we find any geologic evidence of the splitting nowadays? If you split any rock, if you split any planet, you should be able to find some evidence. You should be able to find some evidence. If you if you break a glass and then you glue it, you could still see the crack, right? So same thing should virtually apply to the planet as well. Now, if you Google splitting of the moon by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you'll come across a lot of Islamic websites talking about this miracle, and they would show you pictures. And you could find websites saying, NASA testifies for the Prophet, NASA proves the miracle of the Prophet. And you think, well, it's a done deal, there's nothing to ask about. So let's see the pictures that those websites usually rely on. That's the most famous picture. That's the first picture you would come across. And they would say, this is the scar that was left after the splitting. After the moon split and then it was joined together, this is the scar that was left. This is another picture of the presumed scars. A third picture. A fourth picture. So what does science really say? Because we have to be, when we study things that we usually want to take to non-Muslims, we have to be very confident that this really is true. We can't just take it from an Islamic website and say, yeah, NASA declared the truth and the Prophet did split the moon. We have to really examine those things. Science first says that the surface of the moon is replete. It's full of long channels, the one that we saw. It's all over the moon. And grooves that continue to create unsolved puzzles and contradictions for geologists. Yani those cracks that we saw, when geologist, as you know, is a scientist who studies like Earth, the structure of Earth, when they would come across those cracks and they want to examine them, it's not something that they usually find on Earth. It's something unknown to them. It's puzzling. They don't know how to explain it. And every traditional theory, because we have some cracks on Earth, we have some tracks like the ones we saw on Earth that were made by lava, for example, from volcanoes. But if you apply that theory on the cracks that we saw on the moon, it doesn't fit. And so there were many theories proposed. As you know, how many times did we have men on the moon? Just once. Neil Armstrong and his team. After that, the Americans never went back to the moon. We may give actually a lesson about that. There's a lot of theories, controversies, but it actually happened. Just in one word, it actually happened. But anyway, we only had one chance to get on the surface of the moon and actually get a close look at those things. So there were many theories: lava channels, collapsed lava tubes, electrical discharge, massive lightning bolt. We'll talk a few about each theory. The lava channels, as you know, when there's a volcano like that, Hajj Bashir went to Hawaii, he might have seen something like that. This picture is actually from Hawaii. When lava comes out of earth, it's really hot. It's very hot. It's burning hot. So it burns its track on earth. It melts everything on its way, and it creates such channels. So some scientists said the same thing happened on the moon, and that's why we see such channels on the moon. But then when you compare, you find that it doesn't add up. You find that on Earth, when there's lava flowing on Earth, it would get into obstacles, and then you would see oozing. Like the lava would overflow on the sides, right and left, and it would ooze, and then would change direction, go right and go left. When you compare this theory to what is on the moon, it doesn't look like lava channels. Is it a collapsed lava tube? So what's the difference between lava channel and lava tube? Lava channel is something lava, like a river of lava on Earth. Lava tube is actually under Earth. When lava starts flowing, there's a crust above the lava because it's cooling. It forms a crust, a roof, a ceiling. But under the ceiling that's already frozen, lava is still flowing. So you have like a tube. Shalimonian. The crust is already frozen, but inside it, lava is still flowing like a liquid. What happens eventually, sometimes, this roof that was formed collapses. And then you see like a valley. So they said maybe that's what happened on the moon. But then if you look, you see here, first of all, that's the tube. That's the lava tube. But this is a collapsed lava tube. You see the ceiling that collapsed, it's there. Because it collapsed there, so you could see the rubble. But when you look at the moon, there's no rubble. It's clean. Somebody hoovered it, right? So it's not a lava tube. It's not a collapsed lava tube. Okay, so we spoke about that. That's one of the now those tracks, they are given names, and they call them rills or riles, R-I-L-L-E. They are given different names according to the person who described them. So this one is a famous one that's called Hadley's Rill on the moon. It's 125 kilometers long. That's a long rail. That's very long, 125 kilometers, and 75 miles for those Americans who don't know what kilometer is. So it's 75 miles, and that's a close-up look to it. You can see it doesn't look like the lava tubes that we saw or the collapsed lava tubes. So another theory came along and they said, no, it's not lava, it's electrical discharge. It's some big planet came close to the moon and it caused the electrons inside the moon to discharge out, and then it caused some cracks on the moon. Another theory that seemed to cause less contradictions is a lightning. Some lightning hit the moon, the surface of the moon, and caused those tracks and those rills. A massive lightning, and it was proposed by an engineer. His name is Ralph Jurgens, and he actually he gave a comparison. This is like a track that was made by lightning on Earth. If you compare to the ones on the moon, it looks a little similar. So this is maybe the closest explanation to the truth. We're not sure yet if it's even the truth. What does NASA say? NASA says that first those rills and rimes and rills and tracks on the moon were discovered like 200 years ago by small telescopes. Some of them are really big that you can see them from Earth. And they classified them into different types. They said the long ones, because you have arcs and you have straight rails, the long ones could extend to hundreds of kilometers. What's the bottom line here? The bottom line here is that those rails are still a topic of research. And even NASA, they don't know a clear-cut answer to that. They say it's still a topic, we're still researching it, we don't know where it came from. They say sometimes that it could be something of a fracture on the moon. Even NASA says it could be like from a fracture on the moon that healed. Again, NASA is talking about the lunar surface being broken and then it healed. So basically a fracture. And that it could cut across the surrounding plains and the craters, etc. So let's go back to the picture that is usually used. That's the number one picture that is usually used by Islamic websites as the proof. As I said, they rely on a number of pictures, but the number one picture is this one, the one that we saw at the beginning. This is actually taken from an Islamic website. Look what they typed on the picture itself. They say this is the location of the split that was caused by the Prophet, that extends across the length of the moon. Now you would expect if the moon really split into two halves, then yeah, this track should be around the moon. It should be all around the moon. It should not be, for 100 or 200 kilometers. It should be all around the moon. So they said, yeah, this is the track, or this is the scar that was left by the split, and it extends all around the moon. Now they show us only this part of it, and this part actually was not taken by a Muslim, it was taken by Apollo 11. Before the mission that put man on the moon, there were missions before that went around the moon and took pictures of the moon. Apollo 11 was one of those missions, and it took this picture of the surface of the moon. So Muslims took it and they said, yeah, we found the proof that the Prophet actually split the moon. Is this true? Is this picture really, what they say it is? The picture, as I said, was taken actually by Apollo 10, not Apollo 11. Apollo 10 in 1969, they were only 14 kilometers above the surface of the moon. And that structure that we saw, it's called Aryabios Rail. It extends 300 kilometers. And they say it shows no trace of associated volcanism. And it's not from lava, as we explained. And therefore, it is considered to be the end member of the sequence where only pure faulting is involved. Yani, it's not from lava, it's not from volcanoes, it's just pure cracking of the moon. That's what they're saying. That's what NASA is saying. But it doesn't extend all around the moon as that Muslim website says. That Islamic website says. It's only 300 kilometers. 300 kilometers when you look at the moon is nothing. It's nothing. That's the picture, the actual picture from NASA website. That's another picture. You can see it does not extend all around the moon. It starts here and, I don't know where it ends. It ends 300 kilometers from here. And that's the position of that rail. You can hardly even see it. It doesn't extend all around the moon as, our brothers are saying. That's the same rail. That's the same rail, and that's another one. So what do we conclude from that? What do we conclude? We conclude that those pictures that are referred to as the scar, they show clearly that it's a relatively small scar on the surface of the moon. It's not that big to conclude, this is the scar from the splitting of the moon. So what now? Does that mean that the Prophet did not split the moon? Does that mean that does that disprove the miracle performed by the Prophet to the people of Mecca? Of course not. Now, even though the pictures cannot be used as a strong evidence of the miracle that happened in the 7th century, yet there are still no conclusive explanations to the origins of the structures in question. شو يعني? Yes, as Muslims, we can't say, this is the proof. But non-Muslims also can't say something else. They can't say this is not the split of Muhammad, this is something else. They can't also give an answer as to what is that. What caused those splits on the moon or those cracks on the moon. Keep in mind the Holy Quran, because that's something that we Muslims need to remind ourselves of. The Holy Quran is a miracle by itself. The book is a miracle by itself. But the book is also filled with miracles and all sorts of miracles, scientific, historic, medical, you name it. Muslims, however, need to be very careful when they talk about the miracles of the Quran. Because when you talk in a way that would cause harm to the Quran, yani, when an atheist, I've seen a lot of atheists attacking Muslims for that picture. And they're saying, look, Muslims are lying, and this researcher is lying, and researcher is lying, and this picture is not actually what they say it is. When you do that, when you just put a picture and say this is the crack that was caused by Prophet Muhammad, you are actually causing people to disbelieve. Some people are holding to على قش بيقولوا. When you cause this confusion, you are causing people to doubt their faith. So you need to be very careful, and there is no need to exaggerate certain evidence just to make them fit with some facts mentioned in the Quran. If you can find an explanation, use it. If you can't find an explanation, we will find one day. Because when we spoke about the expansion of the universe was discovered only like 100 years, less than 100 years ago. Less than 100 years ago. Before that, the Quran said the universe is expanding, while as scientists said, no, the universe is not expanding. So before they discovered that the universe is actually expanding, they could have pointed at the Quran and said, your Quran is wrong. Mazbul? So you just need to wait. Eventually you'll find something. So as we mentioned, until recently, a lot of scientific facts in the Quran were in contradiction with the scientific theories at the time. As we mentioned, the expansion. Yet this never meant that science was wrong and the Quran was right. The Quran is always right, according to us Muslims. In many cases, new discoveries proved the old theories wrong, and the new theories actually agreed with the Quran. Other ways, as a Muslim, the Quran's credibility is above any doubt. Is that all? So is that the end of the lesson? Not yet. If the travelers of Syria, the travelers who came, remember, go back to the story. They said, we'll wait for the travelers to come. So if those travelers saw the splitting of the moon, did anybody else see the splitting of the moon around Earth? Did people in the Americas saw the splitting of the moon? People in Asia saw the splitting of the moon? Did they see the splitting of the moon? Let's see. You know the Mayan calendar? It appears that the Mayans actually saw the splitting of the moon. They saw the splitting of the moon. Now, it's really hard for you, I guess, to read. If you look here at this picture, we'll see a bigger version of it. If you look here at this picture, you see a rabbit. Well, that's how their drawing is. They're not really good artists, I guess. But you see a rabbit. You see there's a line on the face of the rabbit. Mazboot? You know what that is? That, in their culture, meant the moon. For them, the rabbit meant the moon. Why did they draw the moon with a split-faced rabbit? It says that, I could read from here, it shows the palace of the moon is being shaken by a quake. The palace of the moon is being shaken by a quake. Then they say the quake or catastrophe, because it was something big. Splitting of the moon is not something you could see every day. The quake or catastrophe is well recorded worldwide, even in Peru. And then they say the rabbit replaced the monkey, when before that the moon was symbolized by a monkey. In their culture, the moon was symbolized by a monkey. When they saw the moon split, they decided we should start a new timing. And they decided to change the moon from a monkey to a rabbit. So the rabbit replaced the monkey as the recorder of time and became a very important figure with the same split phase of the moon. With the same split phase of the moon. With the same question marks curled in each ear. They put question marks on the ears of the rabbit because they didn't know why the moon split. It should not happen. It split and then came back together. You see, that's a clearer picture. You see there is a rabbit, there is a split in the face of the rabbit, and then there is question marks on the ears of the rabbit. And interestingly, when did this happen? Because one could say, yeah, well, the Mayans, they lived from like a couple of thousands years ago to recently. So when did this happen? It says here, the researcher, who is not a Muslim, he said, I calculated the time and it appeared to be the Gregorian date of February the 9th of the year 623. 623. 600, do you know the birth of the Prophet in Gregorian? 570 AD. 570 AD. The Prophet declared his prophecy at 40 years of age. Then he lived for how many years in Mecca? 13 years. So 53. From 570 plus 53, that's 623. That's exactly the date here. 623. Not only the Mayans saw the split, the Indians too. There is a famous story. If any of you ever goes to, actually you could even email them. There's this famous king, a famous king of India. His name is, let's see if I can pronounce it, Chakrawati Farmas. Chakrawati Farmas, while walking on the rooftop of his palace along with the queen, saw the moon suddenly splitting into two halves. Later he came to know through Arab traders that a prophet called Muhammad had wrought a miracle on that fateful night and sundered the moon before a crowd of dazed spectators. He was in India walking on the roof with his wife in a lovely night, and then he saw the moon crack. His wife thought, wow, he's doing that for me. No, I'm just kidding. So he saw the moon crack, but then, there were traders who used to go from Arabia to India and back and forth, trading. So then he learned from them that this is what happened. Muhammad, a prophet named Muhammad, did that in front of a group of people. So this guy, he was so impressed, this king, he decided to go to Arabia to meet that messenger. He went to Arabia, he met the prophet, he embraced Islam, and then he changed his name to Tajuddin. Before he went, he actually spread his wealth, let's say, and he spread the land, and he appointed different rulers in India. And on his way back, he died in current day Oman, Sultanate Oman. He died there, and his grave is still there. And it's known by his name. But before he died, he wrote letters to his sons in India. He told them what happened, and he told them the letters are going to be taken by companions of the Prophet. One of them is Malik bin Dinar. Treat him very well and build a mosque in India. And that was actually the first mosque built in India. And this is how Islam entered India. Not by sword, not by bombs, not by anything. This is how Islam entered India. You will see a picture of one of his grandsons living right now. We'll go back. Okay. That's his grandson. That's the mosque that was built. And they were having an interview with him. How do you take your great-grandfather, Cheraman Perumal? Cheraman Perumal is like the title of him. And, he talks about him. He was not only a king and my ancestor, but the first Indian to come into the fold of Islam. And there is a full interview with him. So this incident was recorded, and there is a record of it in a library in England. And since I'm very careful putting things up here, I did not actually have to do it myself and check with that library in the UK, but somebody did. And he put the emails, and put the replies, and they actually replied to him that yes, there is such a thing, and it says in the book says Muhammad Rasulullah by Hamidullah. There is a very old tradition in Malabar, that's the part of India, that Chakrawati Farmas, one of their kings, has observed the splitting of the moon, the celebrated miracle of the Holy Prophet at Mecca. And then he learned about it, he went there, appointed his son as a regent, and so on and so forth. So this manuscript is in the India Office Library in the United Kingdom. And there's a record of it also in Hadith. Abu Sa'id al-Khidri, he said a king from India presented to the messenger of God with a bottle of pickle that had ginger in it, and the Holy Prophet distributed it among the companions. I also received a piece to eat. Unfortunately, he didn't say much about what happened except for the pickles, but it's mentioned. Bottom line, current scientific data gives some clues about the cracks on the moon. As I said, there are cracks on the moon. However, they cannot yet be used as conclusive evidence. We have to be careful when we put pictures and use them on the internet and we say this is the proof. We might be able to scientifically prove someday that the moon did split in the time of the Prophet. Because now, even though the moon is our nearest neighbor in space, we don't know much about the moon, believe it or not. We don't know much about the moon. On the other hand, science might also come to conclusive evidence that the moon never split. One day we might be able to actually, explore the moon really good and come to a conclusive evidence. No, the moon never split. There is no sign of splitting on the moon. So what now? Of course, as a Muslim, I don't need to wait for the evidence. I don't need to wait for scientific evidence. I don't need to wait for NASA to send someone up there and check if the moon really split. If it's in the Quran, then it happened. After all, it was a miracle. That's what we need to keep in mind. It's a miracle. The way it happened was a miracle. The way it joined back was a miracle as well. And a miracle, by definition, is something that happens supernatural. It happens above any known laws of physics and biology or chemistry or anything. So being a miracle, it could have left no evidence. Because when you think about it, if we lose the moon right now, we cannot live on Earth. The moon is vital for our living on Earth. So if the moon splits, it would cause some catastrophic events on Earth. Yeah. So the same way science cannot prove right now how Jesus alayhi salam was born. If you go to medicine, the only way for a human being to be born is for a fertilization to happen between a man's sperm and a woman's egg. That's the only way. There is no other way for a man to be born, for a human being to be born. How was Jesus born? How did Sayyidah Maryam alayhi salam get pregnant? If there's no sperm, how did she get pregnant? So science cannot prove everything, cannot explain everything, especially when it comes to miracles. So as I said, we might one day be able to find the scar that was left, but we might not be able to find it, and we could actually prove that no, it never happened. But yes, it happened. Since it's in the Quran, then it happened.